All right. So some people have been asking about the whether or not the bolt was allowed to race and what the results are for me contesting the finding. Sorry to do this earlier. I've been traveling with work out in Utah and Florida and just got back last week. Short summary was successful. The SCCA is allowing the bolt to race in H Street. To regret, the race was on, was it a week ago Sunday, and then I had emailed them on Monday night the week before. Tuesday they actually had responded, and they accepted the reasoning, and numbers are slightly different. I'll walk through kind of the reasoning behind that, and then I'll talk a little bit about how the race went. Short summary, it went very well. So anyway, my justification for the letter for the contesting the finding was that looking at other vehicles that are allowed to race in H Street, that the rollover risk was significantly less than those. Again, the big thing it is with the Bolt, the battery, even though it's a tall car, the batteries are very low in the car, so that weight is low. This means this is what we refer to as the center of gravity or center of mass. Essentially the same thing, just one's inside the Earth's gravitational field. But anyway, so the Honda Civic is, I don't know what this one was, 26, I think somewhere in there. Honda Civic was 21 inches, and the Chevy Volt is 20.7. So Honda Civic is obviously not a tall car, and the Volt is actually a little bit lower than that. But it's not just in factor of how high the CG is. It's also a matter of track. So like if you're riding a bicycle, obviously you can have a very low CG, but the bike will still fall over because your track was essentially zero. So they use the mean track, which is the average of the front track and the rear track. So just add those two divided by 2. And what I had used to justify it, rather than just comparison's sake, roughly was also looking at the ratio of the center of gravity to the track width, the mean track width. They do something slightly different, and that's the track width divided by 2. And I'll kind of explain why this all works. So when you're going around a corner, you have to accelerate the car sideways. So you have to apply a force, and that force will act through the center of mass here, or center of gravity. That force then creates a moment that that could potentially cause the car to flip over. But the nice thing is that you have 2 wheels out here that will react to that force. Now we're assuming that the car is symmetric, so that the CG is in the center line of the car. It's a little bit different with the driver in it, but that's all in the noise. So what happens is when you run a rollover risk is, as you start going around the corner, you load up this wheel more and more, and this one less and less, because of that moment. And when that moment gets to the point where it causes this wheel to have 0 force on it, then it will start lifting the car if you keep increasing the force. So what you do is just do a sum of the moments here, which is just going to be, in this case, track divided by 2 is what they use for what they call the static stability factor. I think is what SSF stands for. I just use the full track width just for a comparison's sake, but they have NTSB used to use, or NHTSD used to use the SSF. They don't publish that number anymore, but that's still what the SCCA uses. So same exact numbers that I submitted, they use. They just divide by 2. So what it is then this force is acting here, and you've got this T over 2. That is your lever arm. So the wider the car is, the longer this lever arm is, the more stable the car is. The taller the CG, the taller this lever arm is, the less stable it is. Now when you get to a point where, depending on how much friction that you can actually achieve on your tires, let's say it's 1G. If it was 1G, then these 2 ratios end up being the same. This wheel would be unloaded and it would could potentially roll over. They use go a little higher than that, a static safety factor of 1.3. So it's really easy to calculate. It's the 1/2 of the mean track divided by your center of gravity Z, and set the numbers over that. I'm trying to remember his name. He's writes for the Detroit Auto Press, and he gave me the actual Chevy document that showed the CG, and was able to use that. So plugging those numbers in, the Bolt comes in with 1.43, which is well above the 1.3, and allowed to race. Now, question is, how did it do? It went very well. For me, it's been a bit of used to because I've only ever driven rear-wheel drive cars in anger. Front-wheel drive is kind of a new thing for me, and it's a different technique of driving. Rather than using the right foot to rotate the car, you can just use those front wheels to claw for the car to claw its way through the corners. So it's definitely different driving than what I'm used to. Obviously, very different experience from the EV30. That being said, it's still a lot of fun to drive. It's that low CG. It actually handles surprisingly well. Can toss it through the corners. The biggest thing was putting in the RE71 tires. Those are 200 treadwear tires, so you can still drive them on the road. That's the max that's allowed for being in the SCCA street class. I really wish I could go to a bigger tire and still stay in class. The Bolt is not a light car. 3,500 and change is the empty weight. Throw me in there, and it's 3,700 pounds. And the factory rim weight is 6.5 inches. SCCA for street, you can go up or down 1 inch in diameter, but width has to remain the same. And offset, there's it was like 20 millimeter, less than 20, like 17 millimeter variation offset. It's a real small amount. So so that 6.5 inch rim width really limits what rims are available and what tires are available. The car would do much better with a larger tire. It's very under-tired with that. That's a lot of, that's 3,700 pounds. That's a lot of weight to send through a pretty small contact patch. But like I said, it was a lot of fun to drive, and definitely going to be out doing it again. The car handled really well. Certainly was faster than me learning front-wheel drive behind it. I'm not an autocross expert. I've only done 3. The biggest one was a friend of mine brought his 2001 911 out, base model, and the Bolt was actually a couple seconds quicker. That's an outlier, but index time, it was 18th out of 48. It was running right up there with the Miatas. So I mean, it was, I think it was quarter of a second. Times were like 61, 62 seconds, and it was running in there on the top with the Miatas, and I mean, it was surprising how some of the other ones. We kind of just dig up the timesheet and throw it in there, but it's kind of, I'm not the right driver to really truly evaluate that. It can go a lot faster than what I have credit for, but we're going to take it out to some of the driving exercises. Might actually try. I'm signed up for ice racing in 2 weeks. Fortunately, I'm on the wait list, so we'll see if we get onto that. Just try to get more wheel time on the car. Oh, the other thing I wanted to bring up was traction control. I always ran with the traction control off. I tried running with the StabiliTrak off. Didn't really notice a big difference there. And you can't turn everything all the way off. So even if with everything, you press the traction control button once, and if you hold it down, then it will turn off the StabiliTrak. But even with everything off, you can't just like light up a tire or really break it loose. As if you get on it in a corner, you'll hear it as it starts to break loose, and then the ECU cuts it back. So, but that being said, I'm actually going to try next time with the traction control on. The Bolt has a mechanical open differential, so that means that it'll just send power to the wheel that has the least amount of traction. The traction control should help with that. Depends on how it's set up, and until I have a chance to drive it that way and see how it does. When we get some snow and ice around here, I'll play around with it and see what some low traction situations are. But what the traction control can do is in those situations, it'll actually apply the brake to the wheel that's spinning, and that will then force the torque over to the other side that still has traction. We'll see how well that's actually set up. Like I said, I didn't run it at all with traction control on. I was just playing StabiliTrak on and off. And of course, afterwards, thinking about it with the open differential, it'll probably actually do better with traction control. My first reaction is always just to try to turn everything off, but you can't do that, and with that open differential, it's probably going to be hindered by the fact that you have the traction control off. So I will try that next time. With that, I did take a video, and I will post that as well for some of the runs. But yeah, definitely really happy with it, and look to doing more.